And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got? Policy and markets, elections, current events. The broadcast master tells us how to win. I said, policy and markets, elections and current events. The broadcast master shows us how to win. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Free to Choose edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. It is Free to Choose Friday, and I am Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program. Once again, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, sang style, in partnership with the Washington Examiner, doing our level best indeed to make sense out of nonsense. Abbreviated show today, but a very important one amidst a new flare-up, it seems, in the trade situation, as we will get to today on this Free to Choose Friday edition of the program. If you have not done so already, I do want to remind you, first and foremost, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. You can also tweet at me 24/7, 365, and please follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter, just as the screen says. And of course, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro gets you to Jimmy Sengenberger Media Personality, and log on to jimmyatthecrossroads.com for all the latest content, shop, and more. Plus, be sure to subscribe to, like, follow, all those good things for our friends at the Washington Examiner on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course at WashingtonExaminer.com. All right, I want to get right into the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about today, but in order to do it, we have to cue it up. It's Free to Choose Friday, as I've been saying multiple times because I'm so excited. Why free to choose? Well, two reasons. Number one, because we believe fervently on this program that we should be free to think, free to act, and free to choose as human beings. It is our right and our duty and what we are able to do here in the United States of America. And number two, Milton Friedman's our patron economist. And of course, he had his book, Free to Choose, a seminal work on economics and liberty, and also his show in 1980 entitled Free to Choose, and this is how he would begin that program. Today, here on Free to Choose Friday, we are focusing on free trade, not Tariffs. Simon Lester, Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, will be our special guest today as we dive in to this very topic, particularly because of what President Trump said just yesterday. In Cut 5, President Trump was giving a speech in which he announced that he is going to increase tariffs on aluminum here coming in to the United States from Canada. Here's what the president said yesterday.
My fifth promise to American workers is to bring back American jobs and factories using every tool at my disposal, including tariffs. I love properly put on tariffs because they bring unfair competitors from foreign countries to do whatever you want them to do. Countervailing duties and new trade deals based on the principle of fairness and reciprocity. And I'll be signing something very important. Watch over the next week. I think you'll be very proud of your president. I'm going to be signing something that's very important over the next probably week. And it'll have a tremendous impact on fairness and trade. As part of this commitment, earlier today I signed a proclamation that defends American industry by reimposing aluminum tariffs on Canada. Canada was taking advantage of us, as usual. And I signed it, and it imposes, because the aluminum business was being decimated by Canada, very unfair to our jobs and our great aluminum workers. 7 months ago.
So that's President Trump announcing that he is going to be slapping new aluminum tariffs on Canada just a month after the USMCA, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement replacing NAFTA was put into effect. Now, I'm deeply concerned about this for two big reasons. Number one, the basic economics of trade. Fundamentally, free trade is a boon for prosperity, for economic growth, for individual potential, which we must be trying all the time to unleash. When you slap tariffs on a product, what you do is you raise the price on the consumer. A tariff is a tax. In this case, it is a product coming in like aluminum. And the United States federal government puts a tax on the aluminum. And then that importer has to pay that tax, which is then passed along to the company that is selling it onto the consumer. A tariff is a tax increase. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. No matter how you slice it, that is what a tariff actually is. Now, free trade is something that goes back to the 1800s in particular, with the idea of comparative advantage. And comparative advantage is the notion from what? I think Robert Ricardo, that you focus as a society, as a country, as a people, as a community, as a business, whatever it is, on the good that you are, the goods that you are best equipped to manufacture. The traditional idea can go to guns and butter. You may be very good at guns, or you may be very good at butter. You may be very good at fruit, or you may be very good at cameras. Whatever it is, you specialize in those products that you are best equipped in your society because of your resources, the skill sets of your citizens, whatever, and you focus on that, and then you trade for the other things that you're not as good at. Now, we've gone well beyond that because comparative advantage is sort of more of an economic theory concept, because we're talking about the idea of a country, for example, specializing in a particular product or service that they then export across the globe or to other countries or trading partners. That's something that is still relevant to today when you look at sort of the basics of how the economy functions. But when you look at the real world and how you actually see free trade pan out, the reality is that it's not countries that trade. It is individuals and collections of individuals that make up businesses that trade. Those are the people who are engaging in exchanges. It's not like Canada and the United States are literally trading aluminum for money. or aluminum for another good. What's going on here is companies based out of Canada are exporting aluminum to the United States. It is the private sector there, individuals who are engaging in trade and individuals who are benefiting from trade. Because a business that can then use that aluminum to make a product here at home, for example, is putting that to use in an affordable way. It can create jobs here at home. It can create lower cost products, goods, services for individuals to then go to the store and buy. Especially in the midst of an economic crisis like we're facing at this moment with millions of unemployed Americans. The idea of increasing the cost of something that somebody might want to buy is not a very good one. When we're dealing with an economic malaise like America is facing today because of the coronavirus pandemic. The reality truly is, and we'll talk about this with Simon Lester of the Cato Institute in a few minutes, but the reality truly is that economic prosperity is unleashed far more with free trade, not through protectionism, which distorts the market and which at a very base level then results in higher prices for consumers already trying their hardest just to scrape by. That's what we're seeing here today in the United States of America come about with tariff increases. A lot of troubles, different difficulties and challenges that the American people will face. We're going to dive into that in greater depth coming up here. Amidst the economic malaise that the United States of America is facing, with Simon Lester, Associate Director of the Cato Institute Center for Trade Policy Studies. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll dive in to that conversation. And also, we've got an exciting new sponsor here on Jimmy at the Crossroads that I'm very excited to introduce in just a matter of moments. As we continue, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Once again, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk on a Free to Choose Friday. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Bill Clinton calling your secret hotline here. I got to keep it down because I'm calling from the doghouse here in Chappaqua, New York, at our place. Don't even ask. All you need to know is she's on the warpath again. Oh, boy. Hillary yelled at me for listening to you. I have to do it in secret. But I really admire your show. I really do. I'm calling to wish you the best. All the best. In the future and even right now. Oh, here she comes. Listen, I got to go, but you got a great show, and you're going to do very well in the future. I'll tell you that much. Oh, my God. I know it's going to happen. She's going to have me read chapters of her book again. Put us both to sleep. I know what the title of her darn book should have been. Should have been called How I Dropped the Ball on the 2-Yard Line with 3 seconds left in the Super Bowl. I gotta go.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Concerned about that trade deficit? Looking for that magic solution? I'm Bill of Goods for ScamWow, the tariff towel. It's like a tax. It's like a fee. It's like a penalty. This tariff really sucks up the trade deficit. And the jobs we'll save are tremendous. This is for the House, the Senate, the POTUS. You'll be saying crap every time you use the ScamWow tariff towel. Look at this. It just does the work. Why wouldn't you want to pay twice the price for that washing machine? How much would you pay for this tariff? It'll make this microwave seem like it's brand new. And at only twice the price. Look at the way the tariff towel cleans your clock. Wow, look at that. So clean, you can see the future. You can see future tariffs coming from a mile away. Look at the way it polishes these stars. Boy, if that don't make you feel patriotic, huh?
I love paying extra. I don't even worry about it anymore, since the trade deficit will go down.
Look at this tariff. I love this tariff. It's like a security blanket.
All I can say is, scam, wow!
ScamWow compels other nations to use their own tariff towels on our stuff, making our goods more expensive overseas. Whoopee.
The micro tariff is for everything, for lumber, for steel, even solar panels. It'll melt that trade deficit down. I don't know. It sells itself, America. The ScamWow sells for 25%. But if you call in the next 20 minutes, because we can't do this all term, we'll give you the second tariff absolutely free. That's 4 tariffs for 25%. And it comes with a 5-year warranty. Here's how to order.
Call 1-800-RIP-YOU-OFF. ScamWow is not available in capitalism and is made in Washington. Beware of ScamWow grift. 1-800-RIP-YOU-OFF. Call now.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Certainly we want to be safe. We want our fellow citizens to be safe. But there is never a time to short-skirt the Bill of Rights.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to your host of the Crossroads, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Yes, indeed, rocking and rolling back. Jimmy Sengenberger here with you once again, engaging intelligent talk, saying style, in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you again on a Free to Choose Friday, and we are talking today about a very important issue in my mind, which is free trade, not tariffs. We're going to get to that conversation in just a moment with Simon Lester, Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, and someone I've interviewed many times on the radio. Looking forward to having our conversation here today on camera as we dive in to this very important topic of trade. But first, as the economy continues to recover, you might be reopening old office space or finishing off new workspace. To do it right, you'll want to swap out those bare walls for some captivating artwork. My friend Joshua Scharf has been photographing beautiful Colorado and all over the West, plus New York City, for over 20 years. He's got hundreds of photos in stock ready to use, and if you want something new, he knows just where to find it. Like today's beautiful photo of the week, a photograph of Shell Creek Canyon along US 14 in northern Wyoming. A well-kept secret. This is near the western end of the canyon as you approach Graybull. Gratefully, the skies cooperated with some drama. Whether you're looking for something bold for an investment firm, soothing for a doctor's office, or thematic for a co-working space, Joshua Scharf Photography has the artwork you will love. You might be decorating your own space, or an interior designer working on someone else's project. Either way, give Joshua Scharf Photography a call at 303-520-7503. That's 303-520-7503, or check in to his website at photo.jscharf.com today. From idea to proof and digital to the fine print, Joshua will produce the perfect art to fulfill your creative vision for you or your client. And I have to say, I've known Joshua for years. He was a regular on my morning show, Business for Breakfast. He's been a guest on this program about pension issues before. His photography, phenomenal. Check him out. All right, it is indeed Free to Choose Friday here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. We're talking about free trade, which is so critical, especially now that President Donald Trump has said that he wants to move forward with new tariffs on aluminum coming in from Canada just about a month after the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada USMCA trade agreement went into effect. To talk about this and the reasoning behind free trade, why it's important, why it's so valuable, I am pleased to welcome to the program the Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. We have now Mr. Simon Lester joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Simon, welcome to the program.
Good to be here with you, Jimmy. Good to see you. Visually, we've been on the radio before, as you said, never actually seen each other. So good to see you.
I'm very pleased to have you on board, especially because let's start here. Let's just play what President Trump said yesterday and making an announcement, and then get your reaction when just a month into the new USMCA agreement, he decides to move forward with new tariffs on products coming in from Canada.
My fifth promise to American workers is to bring back American jobs and factories using every tool at my disposal, including tariffs. I love properly put on tariffs because they bring unfair competitors from foreign countries to do whatever you want them to do. Countervailing duties and new trade deals based on the principle of fairness and reciprocity. And I'll be signing something very important. Watch over the next week. I think you'll be very proud of your president. I'm going to be signing something that's very important over the next probably week. And it'll have a tremendous impact on fairness and trade. As part of this commitment, earlier today I signed a proclamation that defends American industry by reimposing aluminum tariffs on Canada. Canada was taking advantage of us, as usual. And I signed it, and it imposes because the aluminum business was being decimated by Canada. Very unfair to our jobs and our great aluminum workers. 7 months ago, my administration agreed to lift those tariffs in return for a promise from the Canadian government that its aluminum industry would not flood our country with exports and kill all our aluminum jobs, which is exactly what they did. Canadian aluminum producers have broken that commitment, and the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer has advised me that this step to reimpose tariffs is absolutely necessary to defend our aluminum industry.
Defend our aluminum industry. Aluminum business in America is being decimated by Canada. Canada's been taking advantage of us, and of course, and we've learned this, I love properly put on tariffs. Simon Lester will dive into free trade broadly speaking, but what did you make of that announcement from President Trump yesterday?
Well, it's not a surprise. He's told us many times about his affection for tariffs. In this specific context, there was this agreement signed between the U.S. and Canada in May of 2019 that anticipated that this might happen. So it's not surprising that President Trump would go back to his sort of go-to move, which is to put tariffs on and declare how they will save U.S. industry and how they will stop others from cheating us. Now, when you get into the facts of this specific situation and most of the other situations where President Trump imposes tariffs, it turns out they're not exactly how he's portrayed it. He's playing a bit fast and loose with the facts. We're imposing these tariffs on Canada. We know Canada's already announced that they're going to retaliate with tariffs of their own. It's just getting us back into another trade war. None of them have gone well. Even before the pandemic, these trade wars, these tariffs were hurting U.S. businesses and hurting U.S. consumers. Now that we're in the pandemic and the economy is struggling, this seems like the worst time to double down on this failed strategy. But President Trump is not going to be convinced otherwise. He believes deeply that tariffs have some great benefit to the economy, and there's just no way to talk him out of it. The numbers, the facts, are not going to get through to him.
So in terms of trade over a particular product, when a tariff is slapped on it, what is the potential impact? Because the idea of, or the impact that we see and have seen throughout tariff history, because the idea is to protect a particular industry. Hey, aluminum is not as strong as it should be. If we slap tariffs on aluminum coming in from Canada, then that will help to bolster the American aluminum industry. Does it work out that way, and does it work to the overall benefit of the American economy? Because it sounds like you agree with me that it does not.
Look, you can use tariffs to protect a small group of producers from competition, from foreign competition. You can do that. So if you want to keep this factory, in business for forever by protecting them from competition, you can do it. It's just that there's a cost to everyone else. And that everyone else is sort of made up of two big components. One is the consumers, who most of that tax gets passed along to. It means you and me and your listeners, your viewers, will pay more for specific products in the marketplace. And now if it's just one product, you might say, well, it's just a few cents or a few dollars. But you add up all the products that the tariffs are imposed on, it ends up being a couple $1,000s a year that you don't even notice you're paying more for. So the consumers is one side of it. The other is businesses. So a lot of businesses use a number of inputs in their product. So let's say you're talking about washing machines, and President Trump was giving this speech at a washing machine factory, the company Whirlpool. They use aluminum in their product. So if you're gonna impose a tariff on aluminum imports, that means that U.S. producers of washing machines and beer cans and other products will end up paying more. It makes them less competitive when they're trying to compete against foreign producers, and it means they have to pass along the costs as well. So when you look at the overall picture of the impact of tariffs, when you add it up, and it's going to vary by sector, but it always turns out that overall economic welfare has been decreased. It is true that you can help out this specific company, and that's one of the big problems with tariffs is they can help specific companies. So companies who are good at lobbying can get tariffs imposed that help them. But the rest of us pay for it.
I want to go to cut 3 because our patron economist here on Free to Choose Fridays is, as you can guess, Simon Lester, the Cato Institute, Milton Friedman. And back in 1980, as part of his Free to Choose series, he did an episode focused on free trade. And this is a point he made that I think is very apropos here to this discussion right now.
More politics of it. On the politics of it, of course it's not politically feasible. Why? Because it's only in the general interest and in nobody's special interest. Each of us is fundamentally has more concern with our role as a producer of one product than we have as a consumer of 1,001 products. The benefits of a tariff are visible. Mr. Deason can see that his workers are, quote, protected. The harm which a tariff does is invisible. It's spread widely. There are people who don't have jobs because of the tariff, but they don't know they don't have jobs. There's nobody who can organize them. Consumers all over are paying a little more for this, that, and the other thing. They don't recognize that the reason they're paying for it is because of the tariff.
Now, what he was referring to in the beginning as being seemingly impractical politically is the notion of getting rid of tariffs altogether. But his points about special interest versus general interest, Simon Lester, are fundamental to this discussion.
That's right. If you look at the aggregate economic analysis, you say, why would you ever do this kind of thing? You're hurting the economy. But the benefits are so targeted. There are specific companies who benefit significantly. So they have a strong interest in lobbying for tariffs. Whereas, the consumers like you and me, it's hard to measure the actual benefit. It's hard for us to organize in response. And so we end up losing a lot of these fights. Now, one of the things that I think has changed, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is that more and more as production gets integrated across countries, there are specific companies who recognize the cost of tariffs because they're using imported goods as inputs. So they're able to organize a little bit better now. I think there are companies who can push back a bit and say, all right, well, maybe this aluminum tariff is hurting this aluminum company here, but it's hurting our beer can production, it's hurting our washing machine production, it's hurting our automobile production. So it's evening out a little bit, but it's still, we're still in a situation where the targeted benefits of tariffs to specific companies are hard to overcome politically, even if all the economists agree, and even if when you explain it to consumers they agree. Just the motivation of specific companies to lobby for tariffs is strong. It's hard to fight back against.
You made a very important distinction there about what we're talking about in this conversation about tariffs and trade. Simon Lester, again, our guest from the Cato Institute. Imported goods used as inputs. There's an important distinction to be made there, that this is not something that is just in a vacuum where, oh my gosh, aluminum is a finished good, for example, that is being imported to the United States from Canada and then put into the market. No, it's used, for example, in beer cans and other products, hence why the Beer Institute is strongly opposed to this move on the part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's something there's been increasing recognition of that over the past 20 or 30 years. I mean, we used to think of just finished products. Everything is made in one place. The full beer can, the full automobile is all made in one place. But that's changed a bit. And companies have started to specialize. And it's not purely an international phenomenon. It's just, people recognize that we don't need to make every stage of the process. Like maybe Henry Ford did, not that he was making his own steel. And we're sort of farming out a bit. And, we'll do this part, and we'll buy the inputs from over here. And that has changed the trade debate to some extent, because now when you have imports of these inputs, there are businesses out there, there are industries that are directly affected by tariffs, and can organize themselves a little bit better than the consumers have. So whenever you have this debate about tariffs on particular products, you'll see more and more the industries that rely on imports for their inputs, have been pushing back against it and making the argument that, hey, this tariff might be helping, company X, but companies, Y and Z over here are getting hurt by it.
Let's set aside for a moment the issue of China, because I think there are some who are viewing this program who may say, hey, China's a little bit of a different animal. We'll get to China in a moment. When it comes to Canada and Mexico and Europe or Japan and South Korea, these different allies to the United States, when we go ahead and when we have gone ahead under President Trump and his administration and slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum and a variety of other products coming into the United States, whether they are finished goods or generally speaking not finished goods, or they maybe are agriculture products or what have you, what has the impact actually been? Because there are those who will say that prior to the pandemic, well, I would say this, that the economy was extremely robust, and they would say, the supporters of these tariffs in certain circumstances may say, well, it proves that the tariffs didn't really hamper the economy. My argument would be, no, I think we could have had an even more robust economy had we not had those tariffs in place. But what does the data show about the economic impact of the tariffs that President Trump has put in place on American allies?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do see a fairly strong economy in the first couple of years of the Trump administration. Interestingly, though, while President Trump has focused a lot on manufacturing and has said, hey, these tariffs are designed to bring manufacturing back to the United States, you don't see the state of U.S. manufacturing being all that good at that time. And there are certainly a lot of reports of manufacturing companies complaining about the tariffs. Again, some were helped, but a lot of others were hurt. So I think that manufacturing was actually underperforming the overall U.S. economy, and I think that's evidence that the tariffs weren't the great boon that President Trump and his administration touted them as, and we probably would have been doing better without them. And then what you also see, of course, is the retaliation from our trading partners. So when we impose tariffs on the EU or Canada or Mexico for quote unquote national security reasons, those other countries aren't buying it. And they impose tariffs in response, and they do that on agricultural products. So that's a good way to really poke at certain U.S. interest groups. And so what did we have to do in response to that? Massive bailouts to the farmers. We're basically paying, there's this huge cost from all of this in terms of undermining the U.S. manufacturing base and then bailing out U.S. exporters who have been hurt by this. So I think on balance, yes, the economy was doing well, would have been doing better, though, without all these trade wars against our allies.
So in terms of the economy right now, when we're amidst this pandemic, and we're seeing millions of Americans, Simon, who are out of work, trying to find jobs in this struggling economy, and also trying to make ends meet by being able to go to the store and buy the products that they need and services at prices that they can afford, when especially their paychecks may be reduced at this point in time. What do you make of the moment now? I mean, prior to this August announcement, we were dealing with the pandemic, and before this year, we were dealing with trade increases, tariff increases, escalations in the trade war, with a fairly robust economy. Now we're talking about an economy that is not at all robust, that is trying to come back from the brink and improve. The potential implications to American prosperity and our ability to get out of this malaise, especially if we see increases more in tariffs, for example, could be what?
Yeah, I mean, there's never a good time for tariffs, but this seems like a particularly bad time for tariffs. So, I mean, you and I don't usually talk about fiscal policy, but I'm guessing we maybe agree that sort of normally speaking, you want to keep your budget roughly in balance. You don't want to run big budget deficits. But now in this current situation, look, I'm willing to suspend some of that because we just got to get people money so that they can eat. You don't want to do anything to harm the economy. And so lower taxes, higher spending, whatever we need to do just to get through this, and then we can get back to normal. Well, I mean, tariffs right now seem like the worst thing you can do. Why raise people's prices when they're struggling to pay for things? It just doesn't make any sense. And it seems like more of a political gamble than anything to go raise tariffs at this particular moment. President Trump is betting that this is one of the things that helped get him elected in the first place. Now we can talk about it. We don't know actually why people voted for him. We can be skeptical of that, but it seems like that's the calculation he's doing. We'll watch it. We've watched this play out over the past couple of years. We can continue to look at the evidence and make the case for why tariffs are bad. Maybe this will give us more evidence against it and will help us down the road. But for now, it seems like we're stuck with it. It's going to play out. We're going to have tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, and people will have to deal with it, unfortunately. It's not a good time for it.
A common point that I like to make is about how Republicans, including President Trump, because we saw it in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, advocate for corporate tax cuts. Let's cut the tax burden on corporations so that they can invest more, so they can hire more people, so on and so forth. It's the same principle that should apply when we're talking about tariffs, because that adds an additional cost upon these businesses that they must pass on to consumers in a different way, of course, from corporate income taxes. But there are still at least enough similarities where it makes you scratch your head when a Republican would say, hey, we need to cut corporate income taxes, but we need to go ahead and raise tariffs.
Maybe it's unfortunate that we gave them the name tariffs. And if we just called them import taxes, people would have had a better sense of what they are. A tariff, well, that's some strange thing. I wouldn't have to pay that. When do I ever have to pay tariffs? So I don't have to worry about it. But it's just a tax. Their taxes are imposed different ways. They're collected at different points in time. But ultimately, they're going to get passed along to a consumer and or a business. You're going to have to pay these things. And it's strange that some groups of Republicans and Democrats, obviously, although Democrats are less concerned about taxes, so you can understand why they support tariffs. But if Republicans are concerned about taxes, they should recognize that a tariff is just a tax, and that people will have to pay it just like they have to pay any other tax. But somehow in the mythology of the growth of the United States, tariffs have been put in a different category, and some Republicans are looking at them differently. But I think that's a mistake. That's just not economic reality to think that a tariff is somehow not a tax.
I think the reason why a lot of the Republicans say, hey, we should treat tariffs differently from, say, corporate taxes is because they're looking at it from the American-centric position of, we need to look out for the American businesses. We need to make sure that American companies are thriving and doing better relative to their competitors overseas. That when we're talking about corporate income taxes, you're particularly focusing in on American companies competing against other American companies within the American economy. But when we're talking about trade, it's a little bit more than that because we're competing, the United States is competing against other countries. At least that's how it's often framed, even though you and I both know, Simon Lester, that it is individuals and collections of individuals who trade, not countries who trade.
Yeah, I think because tariffs are imposed on imports, some people have got in their heads that, oh, well, that's paid by the foreigners. That helps us compete against the foreigners. And I think that they're sort of missing the actual operation and the full effects of the tariff. Again, I mean, it's, well, I don't know if we've talked about this already today. We've talked about it in the past. I mean, the tariffs are not paid by the foreign companies. It's paid by the U.S. entity that's doing the importing, and it's passed along to U.S. consumers. But somehow just the nature of tariffs as being applied to imports, maybe it makes people think that this is not something Americans have to pay. Now, when you walk them through it, I think they realize, but in the normal headline you might read, you don't get walked through it, and there's plenty of misinformation out there about how the foreigners or the Chinese are paying the tariffs, and it's really not the case. And when you look at the overall impact of our tariffs plus the retaliatory tariffs, it does not do. Americans do not do well under a high tariff system. It's not something you're punishing foreigners for. It's something that you're punishing yourself. Everybody's punishing themselves. We are, and the Canadians are, and the Chinese are, if we impose tariffs. And I think the best strategy here is for us to lead the way by saying, hey, we actually believe in low tariffs, and we're going to practice them, and we want you to do it as well. I think that's the way we get to a better position, is if we all lower our tariffs together.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it is important that we take these opportunities, and this is why I wanted to have this discussion today with you, Simon. We have these opportunities and take advantage of them to discuss the importance of trade and why free trade is something significant and a boon to the American economy. I mean, I know I've seen research from Cato Institute that has pointed out that when we have lower tariffs, that tends to track with higher economic growth versus higher tariffs that seems to track with lower economic growth. And something else, too, that fits into that is this notion of a trade deficit, which, and I'd love for you to speak to this because President Trump likes to talk about it, others constantly do as a justification for slapping tariffs on products. There's this idea that, oh my gosh, if we have more imports of a product that we're bringing in from the country, or the collection of products that we're bringing in from another country into the United States, and we're giving out more money as a result, or paying more money as a result, that we have this sort of trade deficit. But first of all, and please speak to this, trade deficit is very much a myth. It's a sort of a financial gimmick used in order to make the case for tariffs more than anything else. But also, if you track with the data, it tends to be that a higher, quote, trade deficit actually correlates with a stronger economy versus the reverse. When you have a lower trade deficit, then you actually have, surprise, a weaker economy. But please speak to trade deficits.
Yeah, there's nothing inherently bad or wrong with a trade deficit. What you need to look for is the underlying economic conditions. And so, there are certainly countries, in the world at various points in history who have had a trade deficit, and it signified that their economy was collapsing. But in the United States over the past 40 or 50 years, when we've run trade deficits every year, what you see, as you suggested, is that the trade deficit tends to get worse, more of a deficit when the economy is doing well. We're out there spending money because we're doing well, and some more of that goes on to imports. By contrast, when we're in a recession and we cut back our spending, well, then the trade deficit goes down. Well, look, if it's up to me, I'll take the better economy and the higher trade deficit.
Yes.
We really need to focus on the underlying economic conditions, and the trade deficit just doesn't tell us much about how we're doing, and it's really just an accounting term, just to sort of account for all the different parts of the economy, how they're doing, how much consumption we have, how much investment. So it's just in practice in the United States for the past 50 years, the trade deficit doesn't really tell us anything. So there's something inherently bad about it. I think part of it is just the word deficit sounds bad. Well, you wouldn't want a deficit. You'd always want a surplus, right? So if we called it the consumption surplus, hey, we're consuming a lot more, people might think more highly of it. And I've tried to spread that term on Twitter. It hasn't really caught on yet. But yeah, I think people misunderstand that they hear deficit, they think there's something wrong, we're getting cheated. But that's just not the case.
Well, what they miss out is the capital account surplus that comes along with a trade deficit, which means that we are getting more investment flows from these other countries. So let's say we do have a trade deficit with China or Canada or some other nation. we tend to have a capital account surplus, a lot of investment dollars coming into the United States of America. And that's an important aspect of this. But also, look, if I go to the store and I buy a widget, or let's say I decide to buy a pack of gum. Let's actually use a literal thing that you could think of, or a mug. Or actually, if somebody goes to shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com and buys a Jimmy at the Crossroads mug, is that person actually facing a trade deficit because they gave the money to the website, to Jimmy at the Crossroads, and in exchange got a mug, Simon?
I mean, sort of technically, I guess so. But the point is, you spent your money and you got some stuff and you're happy with it. So you didn't lose anything. You just traded your money for stuff. I mean, what did you plan to do with your money? You can just, stack it up in piles of cash on your desk. But what's the fun of that? Go get some stuff with it. And as you said, I mean, it may be that we're buying more from China than they're buying from us, but then China's got all these dollars and they end up sending them back to the United States in the form of investment. Right. So it's just this whole trade deficit deception is just and unfortunately it runs through the media, and the media every month is reporting on the level of the trade deficit. And I just why are you reporting this? It's just it's not even really new. It's sort of interesting for economists, but it doesn't tell us anything about what policies we should be adopting. Interestingly, President Trump has imposed lots of tariffs, and the trade deficit was still going up. Now, with the pandemic, things have changed. But I think one thing we've learned is tariffs, if you think the trade deficit's a problem, tariffs won't fix it.
Well, make no mistake. I mean, tariffs absolutely will not fix this notion of a trade deficit. But when it comes to a trade deficit, I mean, this conversation, the whole point comes down to you're getting something for giving something. When you're engaging in trade, it's called trade, where you actually have money exchanged for a product or a service, and that's critical. But one thing that President Trump likes to make a point of, and we just got a few minutes left with our guest Simon Lester from the Cato Institute, Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies there. One thing that President Trump often likes to talk about is jobs being lost to other countries, whether it's China, of course, that's the main one, or he's talking about Canada or Europe or South Korea or Japan or whatever country he chooses. He's talking about jobs being lost to those other countries. What do you make of that argument? What does the data actually show about what has driven jobs away from the United States or resulted in fewer manufacturing jobs, whether they've gone to another country or not?
I think that for the most part, what economists, industry specialists who look at this would say is with manufacturing over the past 20, 30, 40 years, what we're seeing is a shift to automation. We have this image of these assembly lines with lots of people lined up, putting together cars or washing machines or whatever. That's just not how we do it anymore. We have more efficient ways to do it. We have various kinds of robots. That's the unsophisticated way of putting it. And so, it's a manufacturing output. I mean, we still produce a lot of manufactured goods here, but we just use fewer people to do it. So I think that the story of decline in manufacturing employment over the years is mostly an automation story. There is a trade story as well. I mean, I think what you see with all economies as they get wealthier is they go through this sort of this ladder of economic activity. And as we get wealthier, we want to do more, inside cushy air-conditioned jobs. We don't want to people don't want to be out there picking crops or, in these loud, noisy, dangerous manufacturing facilities. So, I think it's natural and expected that in the United States and Europe and Canada, we're going to do less of that. And then up-and-comers like China or Vietnam, who are just looking to get out of subsistence agriculture, are going to be happier to do these manufacturing jobs. So I think there is a natural transition of manufacturing jobs to other countries as they come up the economic ladder. And the disruptions are something we have to deal with, but I think it's a natural and inevitable thing, and we just have to find ways to deal with it as opposed to trying to prevent it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that we have to calibrate to these disruptions, but at the same time, we have to recognize that that's actually a sign of something positive for the American economy, because it means that people are able to go into these other kinds of jobs that are, I mean, look, a century ago was much more of a manufacturing heavy economy. Now we're much more of a service economy, but our wealth and the benefits of our society are far much greater than they were 100 years ago. I don't think we would like to live in 1920. We would much prefer to live in 2020, warts and all. And certainly we're experiencing a lot of warts right now, Simon.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, that just sounds like stagnation. If you want to have a 1950s or 1920s economy, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. You know, what makes sense is to improve our education, our training, develop new skills, and add more value to the economy. I mean, don't we want to be designing the software or the style of the Apple iPhone rather than sitting there, just plopping them together in a factory? I mean, it makes sense for us to try to do more and to be better rather than just say, we're going to do it the same way we did, the way our ancestors did 100, 150 years ago.
Yeah. Just finally, I want to talk about China here with you, Simon Lester from the Cato Institute, because, of course, this is the one where there are a lot of people who will say, okay, I think that there are it's an exception to the rule, even some strong free trade advocates. Larry Kudlow, historically bullish on free trade, is pretty relatively hawkish on China when it comes to trade, certainly since he joined the Trump administration as a senior economic advisor. But when it comes to China, what do you make of the state of play over the past couple of years in terms of the China trade war, its impact, its benefits, its negativity?
I think the trade war has not helped much with any of the problems. I think there are real problems. So I think the story with China is they negotiated their accession to the World Trade Organization from 1986 to 1999. And at that time, they were relatively poor. So we asked them to reduce their tariffs, and they did so it was from 40% to around 10%. And that was good. But in the last 20 years, they've gotten a lot wealthier. So I think it's time for them to step up and do more. And the question is, well, how do you get them to do that? And what I would recommend is for the United States to organize an effort amongst all the other, moderately free trading nations out here, because nobody's perfect, but the EU and Canada and Australia and Japan, to go together and put pressure on China to ramp up their commitments to free trade. But instead, what the Trump administration has done is fight trade wars with those same allies and then also try to fight one with China. And so predictably, it hasn't had much success. I think China's watching this saying, well, we don't really have to cave into the U.S. They're too busy fighting with everybody else. So I think that there are real problems with China, and I think it's time for them to do more on trade. Obviously, we've got all these other human rights and other issues as well, but let's put those aside. On trade, it's time for them to do more. But the question is just, how do you approach it? How do you negotiate? What's your strategy? And I don't think we've had a good one. I think we've got to work with our allies on this if we want to have success.
When I think now more than ever, allies are willing to jump on board with challenging China in more formidable ways. I mean, I think that they could have been more effective in focusing on challenging China with a slew of other nations allied around the United States in some sort of coalition, as opposed to starting a trade war with Europe and with Canada and with Mexico and with South Korea and with Japan and at various points and at various different scales. Instead of doing that, focus on a united effort in challenging China together. And I definitely agree with you that that could have worked more. But at the same time, right now we are facing these human rights abuses. And there is a point which I actually find compelling at this juncture, is the idea of undoing all of the tariffs right now when you need to be keeping pressure on China when it comes to Hong Kong, when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to what they're doing with the Muslim population in China right now, is that you send a bad signal if you actually start easing up right now. Even though they are, I agree with you, two separate issues overall, the idea of loosening the trade restrictions on China at this juncture with all of these human rights violations going on, may send the wrong kind of signal to the Chinese regime.
Well, I think that politically it might make sense to first organize that alternative strategy, right? Rather than just say, hey, we're pulling back, and then China thinks, great, well, now we don't have to do anything. No, I think first you sit down with your ally. Well, first you start having trade wars with your allies, and then you sit down with them and say, all right, what's our strategy for China? And you get that in place. Yes. And at that point, if you have the effective alternative strategy, I think you can withdraw the tariffs without looking weak or feeling like you're caving into China. So I think that the step one with this is to sit down with Europeans and Canadians and Koreans and Japanese and say, all right, what are we going to do here? And that's obviously what to do is a whole nother show. But you got to sit down and start talking about it before you can come up with a strategy.
What's so interesting too is that, look, we've got all this conversation about China. When we're talking about trade specifically, say 2017, 2018 into 2019, China was the bogeyman when it came to trade. Back in Milton Friedman's time in the 1980s, and Donald Trump was constantly speaking about this during the 1980s as well, it was Japan. So we constantly, and nobody's looking at Japan as a particular threat economically at this point in time. It's just so interesting when you compare a lot of the rhetoric that Donald Trump was saying back in the 80s or that Milton Friedman was saying back in the 80s about Japan. The same things would apply if Friedman were alive today, I think, on China. And of course, it's very similar rhetoric that President Trump is using on China today regarding trade.
Absolutely. It's a repeat. I lived through that period too. Yeah. I mean, back then we were saying a lot of the same things they were saying about Japan, and people were worried about Japan taking over the world and they were going to dominate us. And then it didn't happen, and to be honest, it's hard to predict these things, but I look at China's demography, they're not having many kids there. And I feel like their economy, the biggest problem China's going to have in the next 10 or 15 years is just keeping their economy afloat when suddenly they just don't have the new workers coming into the workforce. And, I feel like the threat from China could look very different in 10 or 20 years. Right now, it looks like they're growing endlessly and inevitably, and they're going to be the dominant force. But it might be that they fade a lot, just like Japan does, and they just turn into another normal country economically. Their political system's a whole nother story, and again, that's another show. But economically, they could look like much less of a threat. And then maybe we see a transition to India and Vietnam and Malaysia and other Asian countries rising and being a threat to China. And then China is sort of acting like the United States does now and worrying about competition from poor countries.
Final question for you, Simon Lester. I so appreciate your time. It always is fascinating when we delve into these kind of substantive discussions on important issues. Is there anything else that we should really know or keep in mind about trade at this juncture, especially as we're going into this heated election season, even more closely, getting closer and closer to the November election day? Ballots just a matter of weeks away. So the politics of trade are an interesting animal, but anything we should know about the economics and the benefits of trade or the negatives of tariffs or any of these discussions that we're talking about?
Let me leave you with one more thought. So tariffs are an easy one. People are familiar with it. Many of them have heard the basis of the argument. But one that I find frustrating that people seem less aware of is Buy America government procurement programs. Somehow people see those differently. And if it's got America in it, well, it must be good for America. But when the U.S. government says, well, we're only going to buy American products, not foreign ones, it's the same as using tariffs. You're basically limiting yourself to a narrow subset of products. You're paying more for them because you have less competition. You're not taking advantage of cheaper foreign products. And then other governments do the same thing. And when they have their government procurement, they won't buy American products. So Buy America is not some clever alternative to tariffs. It's the same thing. And so don't be sucked into the fact that it's got America in the title. It's a problem for all the same reasons that tariffs are a problem.
Yeah. You can make a choice as a consumer to buy American. Some may even encourage
Absolutely.
that kind of behavior. But having the government force certain Buy American policies is a whole different story. Well put, Simon Lester. Again, Associate Director of the Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Thank you so much for taking so much time today. I really appreciate the opportunity to dive in with you on this Free to Choose Friday.
No problem. Yeah, good to be here with you.
Thank you. Once again, Simon Lester joining us from the Cato Institute here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And I want to leave you with a clip. This is cut 2 of Milton Friedman, our patron economist here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And in this clip, Milton Friedman talks about free trade from his overall standpoint, really making the case fundamentally for free trade. And I think it's so well put. And even, 30 years ago now, it's still very relevant and apropos. I think it's under-discussed, this topic right now, in terms of the real benefits of trade, as everybody just focuses on certain narrow issues or some theoretical drawbacks.
President Reagan put this very well once in a speech he gave in San Francisco, in which he said, you know, let's suppose three of us are out in a boat in the ocean. And one of the fellows in there takes out a gun and shoots holes in the bottom of the boat. Is it the sensible thing for the others of us to do, to take out our guns and shoot more holes in the bottom of the boat? That's kind of a silly notion, isn't it? But yet that is exactly the notion of protection and retaliation. Suppose Japan and Europe do, and they do, no question, impose protectionist tariffs. That hurts them, it hurts us. If we turn around and impose protectionist tariffs on them in retaliation, all we do is to hurt ourselves some more and to hurt them some more. That we're just shooting additional holes in the bottom of the boat. It doesn't make any sense. The best thing in the world would be for all countries to engage in free trade. But even if other countries don't, then the sensible, rational thing for us to do, all by ourselves, after all, we're the great leader of the free world. We're not simply a camp follower. The idea of our going around and imposing quotas on imports from Hong Kong and from Singapore and from all those other terribly threatening countries, it seems to me it's just demeaning and degrading for a great power to engage in acts like that. So in my opinion, the right course of action for the United States would be unilaterally to get rid of its restrictions and say to the world, come and sell your goods here. We're delighted to sell to you. We're delighted to buy from you. We're delighted to sell to you. Now, of course, if you sell to us, you're going to get dollars. And what are you going to do with those dollars? Are you going to eat them? If you would like to stack them up in a nice pile and set fire to them, we'd be delighted. We can print all the pieces of paper you want. But nobody's going to do that. If they sell things to us for dollars, they are going to spend the dollars back here. There's no doubt about that. And what will produce that result is that the price of the dollar in terms of their currencies, the number of yen it takes to buy a dollar, the number of marks it takes to buy a dollar, and so on, will adjust up and down so that the total flows of dollars in both directions will be the same.
Bottom line, we benefit from free trade extraordinarily as a society, as individuals, and we are hurt when tariffs go into effect and then you get into a tit-for-tat trade war. The last thing we need right now in the midst of this pandemic, the last thing we need amidst this pandemic is added costs for consumers because of an unnecessary trade entanglement now. To add another frontier, to raise tariffs on aluminum and maybe other goods from Canada and or elsewhere, and just after putting a new trade agreement into effect, it was unwise in the past. But it is especially unwise right now, and as a re-election strategy, because of the costs added to consumers. Most Americans are going to look at the aluminum tariffs and say, oh, this is great. He's standing up for an American industry. They're going to look at it, hear the Beer Institute say, don't do this because the price of beer is going to go up. And people are going to say, whoa, I don't want that. Especially not now, when I'm trying to have some fun with my friends if I can. And I like maybe like to have a relaxing drink every once in a while. Not a good idea in general, but especially now amidst the coronavirus pandemic economy. We need to be smart, pro-growth, focus on improving the economy, not holding it back. Most of what President Trump's trying to advance has done that and has been geared toward that objective. This would be the reverse, and it would hamper our potential to finally get out of this malaise in full as we are seeing job numbers improving, but still just slowly but surely. That is it for us today. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you, as always, here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. We will be back next week. Be sure to tune in. We've got Allie Beth Stuckey from the Blaze Network. She's going to be joining us. She is just releasing next Tuesday a brand new book. We've got some other guests that we're working on. Very excited for what we'll have in store next week here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Plus, tomorrow night, 5 to 8 p.m. on News Talk 710 KNUS in Denver. That's, 7 to 10 Eastern Time? I will be broadcasting the Jimmy Sengenberger Show. Be sure to tune in then. My thanks to Simon Lester of the Cato Institute for joining us, to Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, once again working the Matoush magic, to the Washington Examiner, our partners, and to you for joining us on the show, subscribing, and sharing our content. Please share it. Have a great weekend, and may God bless America.